If it's Thursday, top national security officials head to the Hill to give senators their first briefing on the U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear program, as the Pentagon reveals new details on the operation with its most forceful defense of the mission's success. Plus, President Trump is set to speak any moment now at the White House as the administration ramps up its pressure campaign to get the president's legislative agenda across the finish line, despite major hurdles in the Senate and holdouts in the House. And the Supreme Court sides with South Carolina in the state's effort to block Planned Parenthood from receiving any Medicaid funding ahead of a major ruling tomorrow on birthright citizenship and the power of the judicial branch. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Yamiche Alcindor in Washington, where top officials from the Pentagon, the State Department, and the CIA just briefed senators behind closed doors on the U.S.'s recent strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. The classified briefing is the latest move in the president's full-court press, promoting the strike's effectiveness and pushing back against concerns about the future of Iran's nuclear ambitions.
To me, it still appears that we have only set back the Iranian nuclear program by a handful of months. The allegations that we have obliterated their program just don't seem to stand up to reason. I walk away from that briefing still under the belief that we have not obliterated the program. The president was deliberately misleading the public when he said the program was obliterated.
Operation Midnight Hammer was brilliant, it was bold, it was necessary, and it was effective. They blew these places up in a major league way. Major league setback, years, not months.
The classified briefing comes after Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, spoke publicly this morning, giving new details about the planning and execution of the strikes. And the leaders also showcased video demonstrations of the destructive power of the bunker-busting bombs that were used in the mission.
Here's what we know following the attacks and the strikes on Fordo. First, that the weapons were built, tested, and loaded properly. 2, the weapons were released on speed and on parameters. 3, the weapons all guided to their intended targets and to their intended aim points. 4, the weapons functioned as designed, meaning they exploded. We know this through other means, intelligence means that we have that were visibly, we were visibly able to see them. And we know that the trailing jets saw the first weapons function, and the pilots stated, quote, "This was the brightest explosion that I've ever seen. It literally looked like daylight."
There were no new details about the intelligence assessment in that briefing, but Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth took time to publicly scold and target the press after a preliminary intelligence assessment was leaked. That report raised the possibility that Iran's nuclear program had been set back 3 to 6 months by the strikes. The CIA director and the director of national intelligence now say newer intelligence indicates the program has been severely damaged and would take years to rebuild. But in reaction to the leak, the White House says it now plans to limit how much intelligence it shares with Congress, according to a senior Trump administration official. House Speaker Mike Johnson telling reporters he believes that leak came from lawmakers.
Mr. Speaker, are you concerned about reports that the administration might be holding back intelligence information from Congress?
No, we're working through all that. There was a leak, and we're trying to get down to the bottom of that. It's dangerous and ridiculous that happened, but we're going to solve that problem, and we'll keep the coordination.
Do you think the leak came from Congress, sir?
That's my suspicion.
The public, though, appears to be skeptical of last weekend's operation. According to a new NBC News poll powered by SurveyMonkey, 45% say they oppose the strikes on Iran. 38% support them, although there are very sharp partisan divisions in these numbers. Joining me now, NBC News senior national political reporter Sahil Kapur. He's on Capitol Hill. Also with us, NBC News White House correspondent Vaughn Hillyard, who's outside the White House, and NBC News intelligence reporter Dan Luce. So thank you all for being here. Sahil, I want to start with you. What's been the reaction of senators to today's briefing on this strike against Iran?
Hey, Yamiche. Well, I've just been outside that briefing for the last hour or so, speaking to senators as they came out And there's been a mix of reactions. Let's start with where they agree. There's been widespread praise of the U.S. intelligence officials who carried out the strike, their ability, their dedication, carrying out the task that they were assigned to do. Then on President Trump's claim that Iran's nuclear program had been obliterated. You played a little bit of this, but there were real divisions here in terms of how the two parties talked about it. Senator Lindsey Graham backed up Trump's claim that they had been obliterated, but even he said that Iran could build it right back. And he told me when I asked him that U.S. military strikes do need to be on the table if Iran tries to build this back in the coming months. The Democrats said they were not nearly convinced in the president's claim that Iran's nuclear program had been obliterated, that if anything, it had only been temporarily set back. Senator Chris Murphy had a line saying you can't bomb away knowledge, said there has to be a strategy, there has to be diplomacy, which he has not seen yet. And Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader, said he asked this question as well. He didn't receive an adequate answer when he asked for evidence as to the president's claim about it being obliterated. He said he sees no coherent strategy, no endgame, no plan, no specifics in terms of how to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, Yamiche. So there's a lot of questions that senators still had coming out of that.
Well, there are also a lot of questions, not just about sort of the briefing itself, but also who was included. DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, who, of course, the director of national intelligence, she wasn't among the briefers today, Sahil. So I want to know, what more do we know about why she wasn't there, especially as we had reporting that she was kind of getting the cold shoulder here from the Trump administration?
Yeah, a limited amount that we know, Yamiche, given that even senators were coming out of there wondering why Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, who certainly seems pertinent to an operation, to information like this, was not there. Senator Murphy said it's a real question as to why she's not in these briefings. But Senator Lindsey Graham did say when that issue came up that it's very clear that the president trusts CIA Director John Ratcliffe, and that he, in Lindsey Graham's view, is one of the big winners in all this.
Yeah, some other news, of course, that's really important today is that the White House is saying it's going to limit the information, the intelligence that it shares with lawmakers. I wonder, how do Republicans feel about that on Hill?
Yeah, we know that Democrats have been critical in the early onset of this news, but I haven't seen a lot of Republican reaction about this, Yamiche. What it would do is it would set a pretty bold precedent going forward that intelligence is limited to members of one party. That's never how things have operated in the Senate. It's never how things have operated in the House. And, this is one of the situations where everyone realizes what goes around comes around. So I suspect we'll be hearing more about this.
Yeah, we'll definitely be looking for more on that. And House Speaker Mike Johnson told our colleague Ryan Nobles that he suspects the preliminary assessment of this was leaked by Congress. Do we know where he's getting that suspicion?
We don't, but he did use the word suspicion. I wrote it down here. He said, "That's my suspicion," when asked why he's saying that. Now, knowing Speaker Johnson, he likes to align with President Trump. He's pretty studious about doing that, doesn't like to have any daylight between himself and the White House. So if I were to wage an educated guess, because we don't know, that's where it's coming from.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Sahil, for all that reporting on the Hill. Vaughn, I want to come to you next. If the White House is trying to convince members of Congress that the strikes were as effective as the president claims, why is it limiting intelligence that it's going to now share with lawmakers?
Right. It only increases the skepticism that many of these senators have spoken publicly about. You're looking at the airstrikes that took place on Saturday night. The initial briefing was supposed to take place on Tuesday. Because of the return of Secretaries Hegseth and Rubio from overseas, it got pushed back here to Thursday, 5 days later, which was met by a lot of pushback and frustration from Democrats. And now this news that the White House intends to cut off the intelligence that it shares directly with members of Congress. And we should note that the Gang of Eight, which is the top leadership, Republicans and Democrats, not only of the House and Senate conferences and caucuses, but also of the intelligence committees. Not everybody was informed ahead of these airstrikes that they were going to be taking place and the exact objectives of them. And so this latest news that the White House could seek to potentially cut off further intelligence out of fear that it is being disseminated to the public only undergirds the questions here in Washington, D.C. about these two branches of government working in conjunction in order to carry out military attacks overseas. Of course, there's been a lot of pushback, too, about not getting prior authorization by Congress, something that presidential administrations have now, for the better part of 20 years, not sought to go forward with.
Yeah. There's also this issue of the Trump administration saying that it's actually too early to assess the U.S. strikes and how much they've set back Iran's nuclear program, if it's just by a few months or maybe a few years. But the other thing is that President Trump is maintaining that Iran's nuclear facilities were obliterated. And in my conversation with the president, he told me that he felt like he had essentially almost solved the problems of this. He said that he didn't believe that these two powers were going to be shooting back at each other, that being, of course, Israel and Iran. And he also sounded very confident that going forward, he had really achieved what he set out to achieve when I was talking to him. So I wonder, though, do you think the White House is trying to have it both ways here?
You're absolutely right. From your conversation with him 5 days ago to now, he has one very clear message, and one message that he wants his White House to send out to the masses across the world, and that was that their nuclear program was obliterated. Just in the last hour, the White House pushing out this email to reporters that said experts agree with the White House that it was, in fact, quote, obliterated. But this is where you have seen the president really try to pit the American media against the U.S. military in this for the conveying the leak of the Defense Intelligence Agency's initial assessment that potentially the nuclear sites were not as damaged to the extent that the president had suggested, that instead that it was pushed back potentially by just a couple months. That is where the president has suggested that the U.S. Media is effectively discounting the work of U.S. servicemen and women that went and carried out these operations, which by all accounts were successful and ultimately were carried out and executed in the way that they were intended. But that is different than the question of whether the nuclear sites were fully destroyed or not, or where those stockpiles of highly enriched uranium are, which this White House has still been unclear, besides Caroline Leavitt saying that they believe that they were a part of what was destroyed inside of particularly the Fordo nuclear site, despite European officials suggesting their intelligence says otherwise.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Vaughn, for reporting outside the White House. And Dan, I want to come to you. Of course, it was quite the briefing today at the Pentagon. One of the things, there were a lot of things that happened that were interesting, but the Joint Chiefs of Staff also showed this video demonstration of these bombs and what they can do. What did that tell us about sort of this strike, and how does that connect to President Trump's claims that this was totally destroyed?
You know, I don't know how edifying that video really is. It is interesting to see. This is never before seen footage of this huge bomb, this 30,000-pound weapon being used. And it's impressive, but it doesn't tell us, again, what is the state of Iran's nuclear program. But what it was interesting today, General Kane at the briefing did say they hit the targets that they wanted to hit, and that included these ventilation shafts in that deeply buried site at Fordo. And the Iranians had tried to cover those up with concrete caps. They believe they hit those, and then that allowed other weapons to then penetrate very deep underground. So there are many indications from the military and from the intelligence agencies that they think they did significant damage to these sites. But then there's a separate question, which you raised, which is, what is the state of Iran's nuclear program? Because there is a distinct possibility that they have uranium, enriched uranium, and centrifuges and other important hardware that was not at those sites. And so they still may have the ability to revive this program. And that is not really answerable at this point, and we're just going to have to see.
Yeah. Well, as we talk about questions that might not be answerable, I'll ask you another one, which is the CIA director as well as the director of national intelligence. They both claimed that they can back up the president's claim that everything was obliterated, everything was totally destroyed. Have we seen actual evidence to back up those assertions?
No. There is no press freedom in Iran, as you know, and the U.S. intelligence agencies don't declassify material very easily and very quickly when they do. It's only been days since the strike. So, you know, this is their account. We do know that the UN Atomic Energy Agency is saying, for its part, that they also believe there was significant damage done to these sites, that, you know, centrifuges may not have survived at these sites. So there is that. But we don't have, Western camera crews going around there showing us what it looks like.
I also want to ask you, did we get any more clarity on whether this enriched uranium that's critical in some ways to Iran's nuclear program, that was moved before the strikes? Did we got any more detail on whether or not that actually happened?
That came up at the briefing, and there was not really a straight answer. The defense secretary suggested or implied that everything was there and that they destroyed it. But he was ambiguous and kind of deferred to the intelligence community. So that is still very much an open question.
Definitely a lot of other questions, but thank you so much, Dan, for joining us. And now I'm joined by Democratic Congressman Adam Smith. He's the ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee. Thank you so much, Congressman, for being here. So what do you need to hear in tomorrow's briefing to convince you that the president's claims that last weekend's strikes were as impactful as he's saying they are?
Well, I think the most important thing here is, in all likelihood, Iran still has a nuclear program. Now, we can argue competing intelligence assessments, basically educated guesses on what would have happened. But the odds that all 19,000 centrifuges that Iran had before Israel started attacking them, and all, I forget the exact number, it's some 400 plus kilograms of near weapons grade enriched plutonium is all gone now, it's pretty close to zero. I mean, they probably still have some in some centrifuges, so they still have an active nuclear program. So what are we going to do about it? And then in terms of what happened at Fordo, we don't know is the honest answer. And I have seen estimates before this that doubted whether or not these bunker buster bombs could get all the way down and hit those centrifuges and destroy them. So we don't know. None of which is to say, by the way, the military that carried out this mission carried it out brilliantly and flawlessly. They did exactly what they were supposed to do, but there is reason to doubt that it completely destroyed Iran's nuclear program. And if, in fact, Iran does still have a nuclear program, which they almost certainly do, then we still have a problem that we need to deal with.
And as you're thinking about the fact that there might still be this problem, I wonder, did Secretary Hegseth or Chairman Kaine make a compelling case to you that these strikes did create major damage, especially when we think of Fordo?
I think it probably created some significant damage. But again, major, obliterated, there's a whole bunch of words that don't actually mean anything. It's really simple. They had 19,000 centrifuges before. How many do they have now? They had 400 kilograms plus of 60+% weaponized uranium or enriched uranium. Sorry, how much do they have now? If they can't answer those questions, and they can't, then we really don't know. And then it's just a matter of sort of performance to say whatever word you're going to say that makes people think it's destroyed. So we don't have that evidence. And also, Secretary Hegseth being so partisan and so political and attacking the media so aggressively, it calls into question his objectivity. I mean, even if he knew for a fact that this mission had not been as successful as advertised, do we really think he'd tell us the truth? I don't.
Well, I want to ask you a hypothetical here, lawmaker, if I can, Congressman, if I can, which is
you can ask.
These strikes, if they did set back Iran's nuclear program, even for a few months, given the fact that they might still have the technology to do this, but even if it's just for a few months, do you still consider that a success?
Well, success is a weird word. I would say this. I would personally believe that it was the wrong decision to drop those bombs. That the risk that was taken in dropping those bombs far outweighed the benefit of buying a little bit of time in the weapons program. And it's even worse if, in fact, the Secretary of Defense and the President are spinning that the program is gone when it's not. So now we're not even in a position to deal with reality. So I think the risk still outweighed the reward. And look, I've been briefed on this issue for better than a decade now, and there was always considerable doubt that no matter how flawlessly the mission was carried out, no matter how well our service members carried out the mission, which they did, that we just might not be technically capable of completely destroying Iran's nuclear weapons program. And then we kind of started a war with Iran by bombing them. And Iran, unlike Libya and some of the other places that we've attacked without congressional approval, Iran's got the power to shoot back. And that's not necessarily over yet either.
Yeah, well, in talking about Iran's power, I want to get your reaction to a few tweets from your colleague, Congressman Jim Himes, the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. First, on Iran's ability to build a nuclear bomb, he wrote, "The only question that matters is whether the Iranian regime has the stuff necessary to build a bomb and how fast." Do you agree with that assessment, the way that he's put that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a slightly different way of saying what I said about how many centrifuges they have and how much highly enriched uranium they have. But yes, that is the question. And that is the question that they don't want to answer. They want to engage in, we obliterated it, we destroyed it. My gosh, did you see how big those bombs were and how large the explosion was? all of which is impressive, but it doesn't answer that fundamental question that we've been talking about.
Your colleague also wrote this. The goal was to end the Iranian nuclear program, and it is far from clear that that was accomplished. You've just said here that you think that it's highly likely that it's gone, this Iranian nuclear program. Do you really believe that Iran would actually abandon its nuclear program, and do you agree with your colleague?
Yeah, see, I do agree with my colleague, and that's what I said at the start.
Yeah.
I mean, Iran has the knowledge, they have the ability, they have the capability. I mean, even if we substantially destroyed it, how long would it take them to reconstitute it if they so chose? Not very long. So, you know, it definitely presents a challenge going forward. So I do agree with my colleague's assessment. And I apologize, I forgot the second part of your question there.
Well, it's really just, do you believe that Iran will actually, at any point,
yes,
abandon its nuclear ambitions?
Well, see, that's the great unanswered question about the decision to bomb them. Did it force them, did it make it more likely that they would abandon or less likely? You can argue that, you know, in large part, what Israel has done is what has put Iran on their heels by weakening Hezbollah and Hamas to the degree that they have done, by, you know, getting after Iran's missiles and their missile launchers. Iran is weak, and maybe because they're so weak, now they feel like they have to cut a deal, or maybe they feel like, gosh, we can't afford to cut a deal because they're just going to bomb us anyway. It's 50-50 in my mind. Mm-hmm. You know, we do have intelligence capability to sort of figure out how Iran is thinking about this, which we need to get to. That would give us some more accurate answers. But I don't think there's a clear answer to that. Again, the odds are Iran still has a nuclear program, and we still have to figure out how to deal with it. And President Trump running around like he's achieved peace in the Middle East all of a sudden, when he hasn't. And by the way, the war in Gaza still goes on. Israel is still bombing in Lebanon and Syria from time to time. And let me also remind you that Iran and Israel attacked each other twice during the Biden administration. Both times, the Biden administration successfully helped Israel defend itself and then successfully stopped the conflict from spreading. Yeah. So what President Trump has done now is he's done what Biden did twice. So the future is not, I think, as clear as the president would have us believe.
Well, thank you so much, Congressman Adam Smith, for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And coming up, you're looking at live pictures of the White House right now, where President Trump is holding what the White House is calling a big, beautiful event as the president pushes to get Republican holdouts in line behind his sweeping agenda bill. We will also have an update from Capitol Hill on where the legislation stands. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. Right now, President Trump is holding an event at the White House highlighting what he calls his one big, beautiful bill, which the White House insists will be on the president's desk by July 4th. But today, Republicans trying to meet that deadline hit another hurdle when the Senate parliamentarian determined a key Medicaid provision cannot be included in the bill. Senate Republicans were hoping to use the proposed cuts to Medicaid to offset the cost of the bill's tax cuts. Several Senate Republicans expressed frustration that this could delay a vote on the bill, though Senate Majority Leader Vaughn said he has contingency plans.
I want an explanation by her on where this doesn't fit in the Byrd rule, because it's not okay just to make it your opinion. You're going to have to tell me line by line where this doesn't fit in the Byrd rule.
So I think it's pretty frustrating. But, you know, what we've got to do is work through this process and come up with something that, you know, fulfills the Trump agenda, also has fiscal sanity.
Everything is challenging, but they're all speed bumps, and we have contingency plans, Plan B and Plan C.
Procedural vote still tomorrow?
We'll continue to litigate it.
And joining me now is NBC's Mel Sonona on Capitol Hill. So thanks for being here. So Medicaid has always been a major sticking point when you have conversations about this bill. What did the parliamentarian take issue with specifically with that? And what's the plan B or C or D, as the Senate Majority Leader was saying?
Yeah, so there were actually a number of Medicaid cuts that the parliamentarian determined do not comply with Senate rules for this very arcane, tricky process called reconciliation that they're trying to use in the Senate in order to bypass the need to use Democratic votes. That's why this all matters. That's why they even have to go to the parliamentarian. And the chief one I want to flag for you that she ruled was out of order is something called the provider tax or their provider fee. That is something that states rely on to fund their Medicaid program, something that senators have warned would have a really big impact on rural hospitals, but that it also would raise a ton of money. So it helped them pay for the big price tag of this bill. So on the one hand, we're hearing some Republicans are actually relieved that this is being struck out of the bill. But on the other hand, this is only going to enrage conservatives even further, and they're going to have to potentially come up with other ways to pay for the bill. So what comes next? Well, they have a few options here. One, which is what's happening right now, they're going to try to rework the language in a way that makes it does comply with Senate rules. Again, this is all sort of tricky and wonky, but there's potentially a way where they could still get some of these provisions in. The second option is they just ignore the Senate parliamentarian and overrule them. That is something that is seen as a very extreme option, one that the Senate leader, John Thune, is not willing to go down yet. And then finally, of course, they could just opt to not include these provisions, roll the dice, and hope that members vote for the bill anyway.
So they have all these different options, including, as you said, the extreme option of overruling the parliamentarian. That being said, the president has been very clear. He circled July 4th as the deadline for when he wants to see this bill on his desk. So what's the chances of Republicans actually making that deadline? And what are you hearing on when the Senate could actually begin voting on this bill?
So it's still possible they could pass it by July 4th. I think that is becoming increasingly more difficult. If they do pass it by then, that means they've worked through the weekend, canceled a lot of vacations, same for us reporters over here, in order to get that done. And because of what I mentioned earlier about the fact that they need to rework some of that language, that has now delayed the entire process. Initially, the hope, at least, was that the Senate was going to be able to start voting tomorrow. That would be Friday. They have to go through this really long process called a vote-a-rama, in which they can offer an unlimited number of amendments. So it's going to take time to get through the Senate. And then, of course, it still has to go to the House. And it's just unclear whether they're going to be willing to swallow some of these changes. So little TBD on when this is going to get passed. But a reminder, that July 4th deadline is a self-imposed deadline. The real deadline isn't until sometime in August, because that's when the debt limit cliff approaches. And this bill, among the many things it would do, would also raise the debt ceiling. So they actually do have a little bit of time. But Trump wants that big symbolic victory of being able to sign this by July 4th.
Yeah, the president definitely wants to have a party on July 4th and this bill signing to be the center of it. So let's say, hypothetically, you cancel your vacation. Senator Thune cancels his vacation. This actual big mega bill passes the Senate. With all of that happening, it still, as you said, needs to go back to the House. So what's the mood in the House? I know you said it's sort of TBD there, but also, if there are potential holdouts, who are they and what really are they looking for?
So there's a mix of members that we're watching right now. We're watching those conservative hawks. I caught up with Chip Roy from Texas earlier today. He said at this point he's no way going to vote for the Senate product if it advances as is, because he has an issue with that price tag, with the fact that it adds to the deficit. I should note, though, that he has folded before, and he has said he was going to be no on something and then ultimately voted yes. But he voted yes in those cases when he got something in return. And in this case, there's no indication that the House actually wants to go back and forth. They're trying to sort of pre-work out some of these issues before it gets to the House. The other group we're watching, Anish, those high state blue tax Republicans who are pushing to raise the deduction on the state and local tax. That is a huge issue for them. That is something that they fought really hard for in the House. But in the Senate, there are no Republicans who care about this issue, because there are no Republicans in blue states in the Senate. And so they tried to water that provision down. We've heard that they've been kind of going back and forth, trading some new offers, going back and forth. At that point, though, it's just unclear where it's going to land.
Yeah, well, there are definitely a lot of questions. I know you're going to be on top of all of it. So thank you so much, Mel, for joining us. And of course, as we've been monitoring, the president is continuing to hold that event at the White House. But up next, the impact of today's Supreme Court ruling that sided with South Carolina in its effort to defund Planned Parenthood, and a look ahead to the major ruling that is set to come down tomorrow on the administration's effort to end birthright citizenship. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. Turning now to some big developments from the Supreme Court as it widens down its historic term and gets ready to rule on the president's push to end birthright citizenship tomorrow. But first, the big ruling today. The High Court sided with South Carolina in its effort to cut off Medicaid funding to Planned Parenthood. The court ruled that individual Medicaid patients cannot sue for their right to pick a provider. The decision fell along the court's ideological lines, 6-3, with the conservative judges in the majority. And joining me now on set is legal affairs reporter Gary Grumbach. So, Gary, thanks for being here. So walk us through this court's decision as it relates to Planned Parenthood and the possible ramifications overall, maybe even across the country?
Yeah, these are significant because this was a case that had 23 other cases just like it around the country. So basically what it does, it effectively prevents Planned Parenthood from receiving funding through Medicaid. So if you're an individual that lives in South Carolina and you want to sue to be able to choose what Medicaid provider you want to be able to go to, what health care provider you want to be able to go to, you can now not do that. And the Supreme Court has said that that's going to really impact Planned Parenthood because there's many people in South Carolina that may want to choose Planned Parenthood as their health care provider. This now does not allow them to do that. This is, of course, a big win for conservatives because they've been trying to defund Planned Parenthood any way they possibly can. This is going to stop funding in the Medicaid perspective, and so that's going to talk to the larger issue of the abortion rights and less funding for abortion rights.
Yeah, and we're also just to underscore, we're not just talking about people who are looking for abortions because Planned Parenthood also does mammograms. They do routine care, but essentially patients can't say, oh, I want to go to Planned Parenthood, even if it's just for a mammogram now. So that's, I think, really interesting. I want to also ask you about birthright citizenship, a big case. There are a lot of important factors. Walk us through that.
So this all came together because of 3 lawsuits that came from across the country, one from the state of New Jersey, one from the state of Washington, and one from the organization called CASA. And basically, they all blocked the Trump administration's efforts to end birthright citizenship. But that's not exactly what the Supreme Court is going to be ruling on tomorrow, we expect. What we expect to happen tomorrow is the Supreme Court to talk about nationwide injunctions and whether or not nationwide injunctions should go forward, meaning can one district judge in the state of New Jersey, for example, say that this item is illegal all across the country, or does it have to be specific to the parties in the state, in the case, whether it's specific states or organizations like CASA?
Yeah, so we're going to be looking at both of those things tomorrow. Gary, thank you so much for breaking all that down. And after the break, my one-on-one interview with a key House Republican about the future of the president's legislative agenda and his call for the administration to limit its immigration crackdown. Don't go anywhere. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. As we mentioned, President Trump is holding an event right now touting his one big, beautiful bill as Republicans are racing against their self-imposed clock to get that bill to his desk by July 4th. Today, House Speaker Mike Johnson was asked if the rulings by the Senate parliamentarian could make it harder to meet that deadline. Here's what he said.
Well, it doesn't make it easier, but you know me, hope springs eternal, and we're going to work around the clock and try to meet that deadline.
Are you frustrated that they haven't heeded that warning to keep it the same? It seems like they really tried to do a lot.
You know me, I don't get frustrated. I just play whatever cards I'm dealt.
And joining me now is Republican from Texas, Congressman Tony Gonzales. Thank you so much, Congressman, for being here. As you know, the Senate parliamentarian rejected the Medicaid cuts in the Senate bill. You've been outspoken about the need to protect Medicaid beyond waste, fraud, and abuse. So do you agree with this decision by the parliamentarian?
You know, I don't know that I respect the parliamentarian's decision. I don't always agree with what the outcome is, but I think she does a very good job of looking at it through a lens of how do you get that solved. The important thing is I think the president has been very clear. President Trump has been very clear that he was going to protect Medicaid. I think that I've been very clear it's important we protect Medicaid. So I'm eager to see the final result of this bill, but we absolutely should be making sure that our most vulnerable and our seniors are protected. We do not pull the rug out from underneath them midstream.
Yeah. I want to also ask you about something your colleague in the House said, Congressman Greg Steube. He posted this on Twitter, on X. He said, it is time for our elected leaders to take back control. Vice President J.D. Vance should overrule the parliamentarian and let the will of the people, not some staffer hiding behind Senate procedure, determine the future of this country. I wonder, do you agree with that? Do you actually think that Vice President Vance, or maybe even Senator Thune, if he can do that, that they have the authority to overrule the Senate parliamentarian?
I don't know the legalities in it, but I do know that it's a dangerous precedent because, there have been times when the parliamentarian has ruled against Democrat priorities, right? And they were furious and they were asking for the parliamentarian to kind of be kicked out. We all do that. But at the end of the day, I think we need to have, as best as possible, not have a political voice in there. This place is already partisan enough. Everybody wants, of course, their priorities to get over the finish line. I think it's very important that we have, as best as possible, a nonpartisan, non-biased individual that is looking at it through the lens of, what is the legalities in it.
Would you want to see her overruled?
I mean, in this case, I mean, it depends. I mean, like I said, if it's in my favor, then no, I don't want to see it. If it's not in my favor, of course I want to see it over.
So in this case, would you want to see the Senate parliamentarian overruled on this case when it comes to Medicaid cuts?
Well, there were some things in there that I liked that she ruled on. There was other things that I didn't necessarily agree with her. And so, and that's how it goes, right? So at the end of the day, I respect what the parliamentarians' decisions were.
Are you having any conversations with your Senate colleagues to come up with a plan regarding cuts to Medicaid that can pass both the House and the Senate? If so, how are those talks going?
I'd say I had a lot of conversations ahead of us sending the bill over to the Senate. They're pretty busy at the moment with a lot of different things. But ahead of us sending our bill over, I had lots of conversations with my Senate colleagues on areas that I thought were important to them, important to us, because at the end of the day, they get a bite at the apple. They get to make some changes to it. And I want to make sure that once again, that final product that comes and gets delivered, and it gets delivered to the president's desk, which I think it should be soon. The sooner we can get it delivered to the president's desk, the safer the country is. I think that is what I'm looking for, is to make sure we don't pull the rug out from underneath people for Medicaid. We do double down on security for securing our border and tackling some of these other very important measures.
And if the Senate, and if the Senate, in its bite at the apple, as you said, makes deeper cuts to Medicaid than the House version, can you support that?
I'd have to look at it, but probably not. I mean, that's where. And you know what? I don't think the president. More importantly, what Tony Gonzales thinks. I don't think the president of the United States would support that, because he's been very advocate. He's been very vocal on making sure that Medicaid was protected, and we didn't, cut. Once again, people that are lawfully, legally receiving these benefits, and I think that's where we need to focus on.
Do you think that you want to see the president, or he should be working the phones more, pushing lawmakers to get this across the finish line?
I'll tell you what, we have President Trump is about as active as can be, right? From dropping F-bombs yesterday to leaning on members. He's going to continue to be active. That's what you look for in a president. You want that. You want that leadership. You want that constant dialogue. I appreciate the way the White House has been available. If you disagree with something, or if you have an issue with something, you can get a hold of them and kind of work your way through it. You don't, it doesn't always fall in your favor. It doesn't always fall in their favor, but at least you can have that dialogue. So I appreciate what President Trump, how active he's been. Hell, he was in Europe just yesterday. So it's been a breath of fresh air.
I want to also ask you about the issue of immigration. Earlier this month, you wrote a letter to the head of ICE urging the Trump administration to prioritize deportations of violent offenders and convicted criminals. Now, according to new data obtained by NBC News from October through May, the Trump administration detained only 6% of undocumented immigrants known to ICE to have been convicted of homicide, and only 11% of those known to ICE to have been convicted of sexual assault. What do you make of those numbers?
Yeah, look, I trust NBC as much as the next person, but I'm waiting for official numbers from DHS. I got official numbers last year from the Biden administration. Part of our job here in Congress is to have oversight and get those official numbers out to the public. It's very important that our government is transparent. You don't always agree with it, good, bad, ugly, but the numbers are telling. So if indeed those numbers are in fact turn out to be true, it is troubling, because to me, this is a matter of national security. We need to absolutely focus on prioritizing the convicted criminals, which, oh, by the way, there's over 600,000. If we're truly going to keep Americans safe, that's where our focus needs to be. If you get pulled in other directions, you're not going to accomplish that, and you're not going to make America any more safe than it is now. You called it troubling if these numbers, as you said, are accurate. Are you then pleased with the idea that ICE may be detaining or even deporting these people? What would you say is your feelings of how ICE, who ICE is targeting in this way? It's pretty simple. I want our law enforcement officers to be going after the worst of the worst, to be going after these convicted criminal illegal aliens. And, oh, by the way, I think it's good politics for the country, meaning both sides can agree, hey, with a convicted murderer off the street, that's probably a good thing for everybody. If we stay in that lane, I think, one, it heals our country. Two, I think it also gets to the problem of keeping Americans safe. That's exactly why President Trump was elected, and that's what I want to focus on. Let's focus on the convicted criminal illegal aliens.
Yeah, and this week, I want to ask you another question, which is this week, the Department of Homeland Security put out a bulletin warning about potential cyber attacks by Iran after the U.S. strikes against Iran. You have legislation you're planning to introduce that would create a national digital reserve corps to recruit experts to help bolster the country's cyber defenses. As you know, the Trump administration did slash some of its cybersecurity programs, making cuts to cybersecurity and to CISA in particular. I wonder, and there was also, of course, a number of employees that were placed on leave that were part of that cybersecurity infrastructure. Is your proposal, you think, going to be enough to fill that gap?
I think the Digital Reserve Corps, I spent 20 years in the military as a Navy cryptologist, top secret clearance in a skiff. These cyber attacks, they're happening at a daily basis, and these threats are very real. And once again, as the federal government shrinks or is less available, what happens to your town? If you're in New York or if you're in L.A. or if you're in San Antonio, wherever it is, what happens when your power gets turned on? We can't be waiting on the federal government to help turn us on, turn the lights back on. My idea is we already have our resources in our local community. Our local community has these cyber experts. We need to be able to federalize them for a short period of time. This is a very real threat. We can't wait till it already gets here. We have to get ahead of the problem.
Well, thank you so much, Congressman Gonzales. We really appreciate you coming on. And still to come, progressive politics and the Democratic Party's mixed response to the rise of New York City mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani. The panel's next. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. Democrats and Republicans continue to react to Zohran Mamdani's stunning performance in New York's Democratic mayoral primary. The rise of the progressive 33-year-old Democratic socialist has ignited a fierce debate about the future of the Democratic Party. It's also generated intense attacks from Republicans. Here's Senator Bernie Sanders, a fellow progressive, with my NBC News colleague Ryan Nobles with his thoughts on Mamdani's place in the party. Take a listen.
We saw the Democratic leaders have put out statements that were nice and kind, but not necessarily outright endorsements. Is it time for Democratic leaders to get fully behind him?
Well, the Democratic leadership, sadly, too often is tied to the billionaire class and their campaign contributions. What the Democratic leadership has got to do is make a choice. Which side are you on? You're going to take money from the billionaires, or you're going to fight for the needs of working class people?
And joining me now is our panel, Dan Merica, co-anchor of the Washington Post's Early Brief newsletter, Maria Teresa Kumar, president and CEO of Voto Latino, and an NBC News contributor, and Tiffany Smiley, founder of Endeavor PAC and former Washington Republican Senate nominee. So thank you all for being here. Maria, I want to start with you. What do you make of Senator Sanders saying that it's time for Democrats to pick a side and the reaction, really, that we've seen here?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to take a step back and recognize the reason that he won was because he had headlines that he wanted to do something, that he wants policy change. I can tell you, if you were to ask any American who voted for Biden, who voted for Kamala Harris, where are the signature programs of the Democratic Party? What is the policies that are going to take us to the 21st century? They can't respond. And so what the takeaway from the mayoral race, the primary race, should be the Democrats need to come up with a policy agenda that actually meets voters where they are. The fact that the Democrats lost the working class, but their policies usually are of the working class, sees where they are. I mean, I think that the Democrats have to stop saying that the status quo is okay, that they actually have to figure out what are those policies for the 21st century and have that debate. It's not that he's all of a sudden going to represent the Democratic Party. What voters said last night is we want a leader that will actually implement change.
Yeah. Well, Tiffany, I want to get your perspective here, but there's an effort literally bubbling right now that some far-right Republicans, including Congressman Andy Ogles from Tennessee, that are calling on the Trump administration to literally revoke Mamdani's citizenship and have him deported. Should Republicans be worried about an overreaction to all of this?
No, honestly, I don't think that they really have to. I mean, when you look at Mamdani, it's actually like 4th of July fireworks or Christmas Day for Republicans because voters have repeatedly rejected this far left ideology. They don't want it. I mean, his policies are to abolish the police, abolish prison, abolish medical bills, and abolish Israel. That is extreme.
So should he be deported and his citizenship be revoked?
No, I say let him be the leader of the Democrat Party. If this is who they want and this is the line that they're going down, then let's let him lead the way because it's going to look very good for Republicans in 2028. I mean, it's what Mayor Adams said. He is a snake oil salesman. And what he is offering to abolish the police and free housing, he could have done as an assembly member. He didn't need to run for mayor to get these things accomplished that he's telling New Yorkers.
Dan, what do you make of all this? Especially we've seen some, frankly, disturbing imagery from some of the Republicans. Not to say that there's not obviously criticism and well-founded criticism in some ways,
Right.
but there's also sort of there's been an Islamophobic reaction to him as well.
I think we're kind of in this political vacuum moment where there's not many races, so people are trying to take sweeping predictions and lessons to be learned from anything and everything that is happening, including a Democratic primary. I mean, voters in Park Slope are very different than voters in rural Wisconsin, and I think that's worth reminding people. Republicans have tried to use the New York mayor against candidates across the country, including candidates who ran for Congress in New York, did so in 2024, and it didn't really work. So I really think you've got to kind of balance the lessons you take from any candidate. I mean, Abigail Spanberger, Mikey Sherrill just won their Democratic primaries for governor. They're vastly different than Zohran Mamdani. I mean, there may be lessons about his optimism, the way he went everywhere in the media, the fact that he was talking about his bagel order and rats and just kind of very New York things and had an optimistic tone. Maybe more so than like the politics that he may speak about.
And he turned out his base. They were enthusiastic. Sure. It was a 100-degree day, one of the hottest days on record in New York. So I think the general will be very interesting to see what happens in that race.
And Maria Teresa, I mean, there's also, he got questions all the time about anti-Semitism. Right. He, though, is making appearances with Jewish New Yorkers, fellow Jewish lawmakers. But I wonder, do you think that there's any sort of wrestling that needs to happen with his rhetoric as he enters into the general election?
I think there does. I mean, I think there does, and I do think going back to your point is that one, it's too early. New York, outside of this, of course, the Republicans are going to look for a boogeyman of this is what it represents, the Republican Party. The Democratic Party. But again, what differentiated him is he did his ground game. Yeah. He did knock on doors. He did mobilize. People actually knew what he stood for. In contrast, the Democrats are still trying to find their voice.
I mean, at a time when people are distrusting every aspect of government, media, everything, right. They see someone who's optimistic, who they seem to like, despite maybe his policies. Maybe everyone doesn't agree with him. I mean, it's kind of self-explanatory that someone would be drawn to that level of optimism.
Right, and like you were saying, the Democrat Party does not have a clear, concise agenda for the American people. So they're sort of like clinging to anything they can. And again, I say, hey, if this is the Democrat Party, which they sort of showed us, this is why Donald Trump won in a mandate election in November, is the voters across this country rejected that.
Well, I would say a mandate, and I would actually say, and I always remind folks that the largest growing group of American voters are the non-voters. They're the ones that are sitting off the couch because they're saying, you know what, the Democrats, you're not delivering for what I need, and I don't believe in this cultural extremism that the Republican Party represents.
I just want to ask you, and if we could, because there's also the big, beautiful bill. I call it the congressional legislative bill. There's a lot of ways to describe it. The point is that President Trump, a bill with many names and lots of dollars. Yeah. July 4th is circled on President Trump's calendar as the day he wants to have his party and sign this bill. Yeah. Is that going to happen? Could that happen?
Wow, if I knew that, I'm not sure I would. I don't know what I would be doing to make money off of it, but I think that there's a lot of headaches between now and then. I mean, he clearly wants to sign the bill with a big party, a July 4th party, kind of his big moment. I mean, you saw today the Senate parliamentarian struck a number of key programs, key ideas from the bill. Yeah. And Republicans are at an inflection point of what are they going to do with that? Are they going to go nuclear and try and oust the parliamentarian? Are they going to take stuff away out of the bill? Something in between? And then you have the whole question about, so if this passes the Senate this weekend, whenever, now it goes back to the House, and you're already seeing in the House there are Republicans who are mad about what the Senate's doing. So this is like literally the sausage being made, and so I don't think I have an answer on July 4th.
Tiffany, do you want to see the Senate parliamentarian overruled? And what do you think needs to happen for this to get to the president's desk?
I mean, I think the Senate parliamentarian at a time like now needs to be fired, and that wouldn't be unprecedented. It happened in 2001.
And do you think that's because she's partisan, or what? Why do you think she needs to be fired?
She is applying political bias and ideologies instead of the
Even
Senate
though she's
rules.
an independent viewer of
But
this.
she's clear what she's applying. I mean, this bill needs to get across the line for the American people. Again, back to the mandate vote in November. This is what the American people want. It will deliver the largest tax cut for small businesses, American families. It will secure our border, massive investments into energy, energy independence. So it needs to get done. And I have, real quick, I've talked to congressmen and senators over the last week. Everyone is optimistic. I honestly was skeptical of Speaker Johnson's first self-imposed deadline, and they got it done. I believe they will get this done.
We only have 10 seconds yet, but Maria Teresa, I want to give you the last word here.
I mean, the reason that she did it, she's a ref, right? The Democrats didn't like her, and they were they thought about firing her last time around, too. It doesn't happen. We want her on that seat. But to think that they're going to remove 70 million Americans from Medicaid cuts and at the same time give billions of dollars to basically create private detentions, that says why we have to have a
We could talk about this a lot more, but I have to go now. So thank you so much to all of you. And speaking of Zohran Mamdani, we should say that Kristen will have an exclusive interview with him on Sunday for Meet the Press. It's going to be only on Sunday and only on Meet the Press. So definitely we're going to look forward to that. And we're back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now. The news continues right now with Hallie Jackson.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.